Did you know that 4,476 Christians around the world, more than 12 a day on average, were killed for faith-related reasons in 2024? Another 4,744 Christians were arrested or illegally detained, and nearly 8,000 churches and other Christian institutions were attacked, many destroyed. Or did you know that overall the global persecution of Christians has reached unprecedented levels, so that more than 380 million Christians suffer high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith? These are all findings and quotes from the World Watch List of 2025, published earlier this year by the international human rights organization Open Doors. Each year, this list ranks the top 50 nations where Christians are most persecuted for their faith. According to it, 1 in 7 Christians around the world, or 14% of all Christians, is persecuted. In Africa, that number grows to 1 in 5, meaning 20%. And in Asia, it's a whopping 2 in 5, meaning 40% of all Christians are persecuted in that continent. Now, the list categorizes the persecution under 3 levels: extreme, very high, and high levels of persecution. The top 13 of the 50 nations making the list are characterized by the worst form of persecution, extreme. They are 1. North Korea, 2. Somalia, 3. Yemen, 4. Libya, 5. Sudan, 6. Eritrea, 7. Nigeria, 8. Pakistan, and 9. Iran, 10. Afghanistan, 11. India, 12. Saudi Arabia, and 13. Myanmar. The form of persecution experienced in these 13 worst offenders ranges from assault, rape, imprisonment, or downright murder for anyone identified as Christian. Coming in at number 1 is North Korea, where, quote, if your Christian faith is discovered in North Korea, you could be killed on the spot. If you aren't killed, you will be deported to a labor camp and treated as a political criminal. You will be punished with years of hard labor that few survive. North Korean authorities are likely to round up your extended family and punish them too, even if your family members aren't Christians. There is no church life in North Korea. It's impossible to gather for worship or prayer, and even secret worship and prayer is at great risk. Moving down the list, it's interesting to note that the extreme persecution meted out to Christians in 9 of the remaining 12 worst nations is a product of what the list calls Islamic oppression, or it occurs in nations with large Muslim populations. Put to number, this means that about 70% of the absolute worst or extreme persecution around the globe takes place in the name of Islam. This trend affects the entire list. The rest of the very high or high levels of persecution that Christians experience in 37 of the 50 ranked nations, or 74%, also comes either from Islamic oppression or occurs in nations with majority or large Muslim populations. Many of these nations are governed by some form of Sharia, Islamic law. Those enforcing the persecution can either be government or society, or more frequently both. Although societies, particularly family members outraged by relatives who have converted to Christianity, tend to be more zealous in the application of Sharia. In other words, although North Korea is home to the worst form of Christian persecution in the world, there is at least some light at the end of the tunnel. Because the ill treatment of Christians is entirely connected to the regime of Kim Jong-un, once his line has been ousted, which is inevitable, North Korea may well become like South Korea, where Christianity is flourishing. Conversely, the Muslim persecution of Christians is existential, perennial, and far transcends this or that regime or ruler. It's part of the history, doctrines, and socio-political makeup of Islam, hence its tenacity and ubiquity. Now let's take a brief look at those 9 Muslim nations where extreme, the worst form of persecution, occur. In Somalia, which comes in at number 2, where only a few hundred Christians are believed to exist, quote, following Jesus is a matter of life and death. Al-Shabaab, which means the youth, a violent Islamist militant group, enforces a strict form of Sharia, Islamic law, and is committed to eradicating Christianity from Somalia. They have often killed Somali Christians on the spot. The dangers have increased over the years as the militants have increasingly focused on finding and eliminating Christian leaders. In Yemen, number 3, the country is divided into territory ruled by 3 different Muslim powers, as well as some areas held by Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State. None of the powers involved are sympathetic to Christians, and the official constitution upholds Sharia, Islamic law, and no freedom of religion. The 1% of Yemenis from minority religions are severely marginalized. Relief aid is mostly distributed through local Muslim groups and mosques, which are alleged to be discriminating against anyone not considered a devout Muslim. If someone is reported to be a Christian and or involved in Christian activities, they could face severe monitoring, arbitrary detention, torture, ill treatment, and even murder. In Libya, coming in at number 4, quote, following Jesus is a huge risk for anyone. Libyan Christians with a Muslim background face violent pressure from their families and communities to renounce their faith. Foreign Christians, especially those from sub-Saharan Africa, are targeted by Islamist militant and criminal groups. These groups kidnap and sometimes brutally kill Christians. Even if they avoid such a fate, sub-Saharan Christians face harassment and threats from radical Muslims. Christians who openly express their faith or try to share it with others risk arrest and violent opposition. In Sudan, which comes in at number 5, quote, Sudan was on a path towards religious freedom, but a coup and devastating war dashed these hopes. Christians are once again in danger. The conflict has given Islamist extremists more opportunity to target them. More than 100 churches have been damaged so far, and Christians have been abducted and killed. Sudanese Christians who have come to faith from a Muslim background face severe backlash from their families and communities. In Nigeria, number 7, quote, jihadist violence continues to escalate in Nigeria, and Christians are particularly at risk from targeted attacks by Islamist militants, including Fulani fighters, Boko Haram, and the Islamic State, West Africa province. The attacks are shockingly brutal. Many believers are killed, particularly men, while women are often kidnapped and targeted for sexual violence. More believers are killed for their faith in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. Elsewhere, the report notes that a total of 3,100 Nigerian Christians, quote, paid the ultimate price for their faith, end quote, in 2024. The report continues regarding Nigeria. These militants also destroy homes, churches, and livelihoods. Christians living in northern Nigerian states under Sharia, Islamic law, can also face discrimination and oppression as second-class citizens. Converts from Islam often experience rejection from their own families and pressure to renounce their new faith. They often have to flee their homes for fear of being killed. Christian carnage is so endemic to Nigeria that only recently, on April 13th, Palm Sunday, 54 Christians were slaughtered following church celebrations in one village alone. Since then, there have been many more massacres. The headline of an April 22 report is, quote, more than 170 Christians killed during Lent, Easter in Nigeria. And as bad as it is in Nigeria, according to the report, quote, sadly, more Christians were killed outside Nigeria, many in sub-Saharan Africa countries like Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Niger, etc. Multiple countries in sub-Saharan Africa have seen a rise in violence against Christians. Currently, 8 of the top 10 deadliest places for Christians are in sub-Saharan Africa. And all of them, except Nigeria, have more faith-based killings than they did in the previous year. Moving along, in Pakistan, which comes in at number 8, quote, Pakistan's notorious blasphemy laws are often used to target minority groups, but Christians are disproportionately affected. Indeed, roughly a quarter of all blasphemy accusations target Christians, who make up just 1.8% of the population. Blasphemy laws carry a death sentence. People accused of blasphemy are vulnerable to attack or murder by mobs. In June 2024, an elderly man was killed by mob violence after being accused of desecrating the Quran. Historical churches are heavily monitored and have been targeted for bomb attacks. The number of Christian girls abducted, abused, and forcefully converted to Islam, frequently backed by lower courts, is growing. All Christians suffer institutionalized discrimination. Occupations that are deemed low, dirty, and degrading, such as cleaning sewers or working in brick kilns, are reserved for Christians by the authorities. Many are referred to as chura, a derogatory term meaning filthy. Christians are also vulnerable to being trapped in bonded labor. In Iran, number 9, quote, unrecognized converts from Islam to Christianity face severe religious freedom violations, primarily from the government and to a lesser extent from society and their families. The government views these converts as a threat, believing they are influenced by Western countries to undermine Islam and the regime. Both leaders and ordinary members of Christian groups are often arrested, prosecuted, and given long prison sentences for crimes against national security. Recognized historical communities such as Armenian and Assyrian Christians are state-protected but treated as second-class citizens. They face many discriminatory legal provisions and are not allowed to worship in Persian, the language, or interact with Christian converts. Those who support converts can also face imprisonment. In Afghanistan, number 10, most Afghan Christians are converts from Islam, which makes it basically impossible to practice their faith openly. In Afghanistan, leaving Islam and conversion is punishable by death under Islamic law. This has been increasingly enforced since the Taliban took control of the country in 2021. If converts are discovered, the family, clan, or tribe may try to preserve its honor and deal with the convert through pressure, violence, or even murder. If a convert's faith is discovered by the government, many Afghan believers have no other option but to try to flee. Women and ethnic minorities experience additional oppression. Christians among these groups live under unthinkable pressure. In Saudi Arabia, number 12, our great friend and ally, quote, "It's very risky to become a Christian in Saudi Arabia. Not only is it illegal to leave the Islamic faith, new believers will face intense opposition from their families and communities as well. Because of this, most Saudi Christians tend to follow their faith quietly and secretly. This extends as far as not even telling their own spouse or children about their faith, for fear that extended family members or school staff could discover that they have left Islam. There are no legal church buildings or meetings." So much for the 13 nations, 9 of which are Muslim, where Christians experience the absolute worst or most extreme forms of persecution. Before moving on, it's interesting to reflect on how different these 9 Muslim nations are, including racially, socially, economically, and politically. Some are rich, Saudi Arabia. Others are dirt poor, Somalia. Some are advanced, Iran. Others are far from it, Yemen. They are represented by a variety of governments, republics, monarchies, and one theocracy. Various different races are represented: Arabs, black Africans, Pakistanis, Persians, and Afghans. And they speak a multitude of languages. These differences grow even more when looking at the full list of Muslim nations that make the top 50. It includes Sinic or Chinese-like and Turkic nations, such as the Maldives, number 16, Uzbekistan, 25, Turkey, 45, and Brunei, 48. So what binds all of these diverse nations together? What makes them all exhibit the same hostile behavior against Christians? The answer should be clear. The one and only common denominator they all share is Islam. Is there any more ironclad proof that Islam is inherently hostile to Christians, indeed, to all infidels? That said, and even though Muslims continue to have the lion's share of persecution, even outside the world, hate for and violence against Christianity has become pandemic. Quote, "Several countries on the World Watch list saw an increase in anti-Christian violence. While the contexts were different, either tightly controlled autocratic states or countries that are unstable due to weak government or civil war, the result was the same: targeting of Christian communities, destruction of lives, homes, and churches, and immense pressure on believers. A rise in Hindu nationalism has made India, number 11, a hotbed of persecution." Quote, "In India, Hindu extremists view all Christians as outsiders and aim to cleanse the nation of Islam and Christianity, often using extensive violence. This hostility is often driven by Hindatva, an ongoing Hindu nationalist belief among some extremists that Indians ought to be Hindu and no other faith will be tolerated. This mindset has led to violent attacks across the country and impunity for the people who perpetrate them. In such places, Christians who attend house churches risk attack by extremist mobs who target services. Additionally, 12 states have passed anti-conversion laws, which threaten religious freedom for individual believers. Even in Buddhist Myanmar, number 13, the last nation to make the top 13 offenders where Christians experience extreme levels of persecution. Quote, "Since the military coup in February 2021, Christians have encountered greater violence and tighter restrictions. Believers have been killed and churches have been indiscriminately attacked. This includes those in predominantly Christian states. More Christians than ever have been driven out of their homes and have found refuge in churches or displacement camps. Some are even forced to flee into the jungle, where they are often deprived of access to food and health care. Government forces have continued to disproportionately attack Christian villages and churches. They have also killed Christian aid workers and pastors, often in aerial attacks. Beyond the conflict, converts to Christianity find themselves persecuted by their Buddhist, Muslim, or tribal families and communities because they have left their former faith. Communities who aim to stay Buddhist only make life impossible for Christian families. Indeed, even in nations that would appear to be friendly or at least neutral to Christianity, for example, the predominantly Catholic nations of Cuba, number 26, Nicaragua, number 30, Mexico, number 31, and Colombia, number 46, Christians are being abused for their faith from a variety of actors, including drug cartels, rebel groups, and even the governments themselves, such as in Cuba and Nicaragua. Perhaps the most disturbing trend is that the persecution of Christians continues to grow every year and has nearly doubled since 1993, when this list, the World Watch list, was first issued. Then only 40 nations scored high enough to warrant sufficient tracking. Today, nearly double that number qualify, though the list limits itself to the top 50. You need to ask yourself, how long before this ongoing trend spills into even those Western nations once hailed for their religious liberties, the very nations you live in? They've already gotten the Christians of the West to grow accustomed to being second-class citizens in their own nations. How long before anti-Christian hostility turns into outright persecution, akin to the sort we just reviewed? And will the slow-boiled frog of the West even notice this transition?